Last class I went over the character setup after you have the character picked out, going through and setting up the rig so that you can use it for the poses. I want to go through the poses part now. We have about a month and a week left of classes after this week. So we got a lot of work to do with these characters. So the poses here are going to be due a week from today. They shouldn't take too long if you get on top of it and make sure all your stuff is set up and you do it correctly the first time. The idea with this is that we're using a rig to create poses for the character, finding the rig that works, prepping it, posing the character to replicate line of action, weight, overall poses. You're going to be doing this to 3 different images. So you'll have to find the images you're using as reference that you will then recreate or repose your character to. Nice lighting, nice materials, nice shading, everything inside the scene. Make sure the character is smoothed out, polished, professional looking. You'll turn in your scene, any images that you rendered out, any source images that you may have used for your character, and then any reference images that you created or that you found that you're using. So when I see your character is doing a ballet pose, I want to see the ballet reference image that you're using. So you should have 3 rendering images that you've rendered out and then 3 reference images. The rendered images will be 3000 by 2400 pixels each, and it'll be 12 points possible. Now you can go bigger. If you wanted to incorporate multiple characters inside your scene, definitely do like a bigger image so that you can see them a lot clearer. Here's a for instance. So this is my Mr. Manhattan. This is one of his poses here. And then, no, it's Mr. Manhattan. It's copywritten. Here he is again. So you'll see all of these are just like the same. He held on. There's a whole storyline here, right? So something's happened. He's very upset. Yeah. The off-brand Watchman. But you see he held on. He decided to save it. So you see this is part of a story. So each one of these images is 3000 by 2400, and then I stitched them all together into one image. I've also used depth of field on these so that it looks a lot nicer. I didn't really use, I don't think I used real depth of field. I just kind of blurred it out inside of Photoshop afterwards. I adjusted the colors. You'll see they're very effective images because they tell a story. It's more than just a single image. It gives them hope. See, all the other ones are blue, sad, and that one has a little bit of joy to it.
More melancholy than hopeful, but
Yeah. The model, same site. He's on there somewhere. I just didn't care for working with him because in some of these, like I'm like right up in there, like working on his poses. Here's an actual pose. This is typically something that people would have in the class. It didn't render out, that's why you see the black around it. But this is what we're going to be kind of shooting for. So you'll go into Google, you'll find an image you want to use, you'll save it to your folder, put it in there so you have reference. Again, the bigger the image, the fuller the body, the easier it is to replicate. If you can't see what the legs are doing, you can't get into it. Sometimes it helps too, if it's a pose you can do, to actually put yourself in that pose to see what your hips are doing and your spine is doing and your shoulders are doing. So I'm going to use this one as reference and throw it onto the other computer. I'm going to go into Maya and I'm going to open up my Mr. Manhattan ready to go. So that's the one that I set up. All of my character sets are here. All of my materials are set up on him. Yes, no. Yes. There's his character set. It says Mr. Manhattan. See? Head, lower body, upper body. We're not going to use these for this. We will use these for future assignments. But we want to obviously pay attention to those. Make sure they're there. All right. So the first thing you do when you set up your character for a pose is looking at what this character is doing. The most important thing in any character is the hips. Where are the hips located? Because that will dictate where the legs are going to be, where the arms are going to be, where the spine is going to be, everything. So his hips are like obviously seated down. He's like in a squat position. The next thing I look at is his spine. Which direction is his spine going? And then where are his legs going? And I kind of work around that, right? So first thing is the hips. So I'm going to go to his rig, and I'm just going to push the hips down. And his hips are actually rotated some. If you have one of your legs forward, and this is why it's important to kind of be able to get into these positions, if his right leg is forward, that's his right, then your hips would also be rotated that way. I'll also move the foot just to make sure I have the right position for this. There should be a sense of weight to it. So if he was like, just as a for instance, if he's like this, he's going to fall down most likely. There's no center of weight. He would just like tip back over. But if I put his foot back here like this, if I go to ankle roll or foot roll probably, yes, foot roll, and I push that up, that makes him feel like he's actually putting some weight on this foot and on that foot. He's also kind of rotated, I think that way and this way a bit, and maybe that way a bit more. There you go. And he has a little bit more weight this way, and I think he's actually a little bit over that way, and this foot is probably a little bit more back. And his knee, I believe I control it through... Where's your knee controller? Leg twist. There it is. There we go. All right. So, just looking at the legs, that's pretty close to that. Okay. His foot is actually a lot further down, so he needs to squat a lot further. Let's bring you really close into this. Bring him down. Bring him more forward. This leg is at like a right angle. This is probably going to have to go back a bit more. And have a little bit more leg twist here. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to look at the spine. His spine is like twisted to that side. So I'm going to, this has to be rotated so his spine can rotate. And then I'm also going to rotate these. So anytime your spine moves, it's not one spot that your spine will move left or right. There's a whole chain of joints that cause your spine to rotate. His rig is pretty good because when I grab this and rotate it, you can see how his spine is all rotating together. It's not just like one joint. There we go. And you'll look at his hips are rotated. The right hip is forward, but his left shoulder is forward. And that's typical like of a walk cycle. You typically alternate. So I'm going to do the same thing. So his right hip is forward. So that means that his shoulders here should be rotated the opposite direction. And then that hand is kind of cocked backwards like this. Maybe this is how he gets so depressed. He gets into a fight with someone and he loses.
Well, he's Mr. Manhattan. Probably kill him and then get depressed.
Well, that's the problem. He didn't kill him.
Oh, wow. The one control is shaped like his emblem on his chest.
Mm-hmm. There's his elbow. Go back to this one. Oops. He has this other little circle here. That's how I do the hand controls. And he has, let's see, curl. There we go. It's angry. All right. And then this arm looks really funky, so let's fix that one. That one's going to be more in front of him, like this. Rotate it around.
Did the guy who made this model, did he make any other Watchmen bootlegs?
I don't think so. I think he just had this one. That elbow is up higher. And his shoulder is also up higher, so I need to grab his shoulder and rotate. Here. There we go. Maybe pull that forward a little bit. That's good. And his head looks like it's rotated a bit. That's his throat. That's a weird control for his throat. There we go. That's his jaw. Where's his head? That one. And I should have another one for controlling his neck some more. There it is. Rotate his head up a little bit more now that we have the other controls. And this needs to twist a little bit there and maybe there a little bit. Yeah. It was like half, right? That. All right, so that's pretty close. So that's the idea with these, is that you just kind of go into it, move the hips, and then you start working your way outward to all these other pieces. Get the feet in position. If his legs were shorter, there's no way he would be able to get into that position. So I would have to emulate that the best I can. Same thing with his arms. If his arms are shorter or longer, I have to, again, kind of fake what that looks like. In this scene, I don't have a ground, so I'm going to put a ground. If I find it, there it is. Give this a material. No reflection. Or not no reflection, roughness. Round. All right. I'll save this as Mr. Manhattan. Pose new 01. Okay, I don't want to overwrite the other one I had. I just wanted this to be Mr. Manhattan Pose 01. And then when I go to Pose 2, I open up that same file I started with and do the second pose. Then I open up the same file again, do the third pose. When I render this, I make sure that my render settings are 3000 pixels by 2400 pixels. You can go the other way too, 2400 by 3000. Whichever one makes your stuff, you know, the best angle. Turn my resolution gate on. Find a good angle. It doesn't have to be the same one from the picture. If you find that, you know, you found a better angle to put it at. His neck looks weird. I'm going to fix that. Looks really weird. Ugh. There we go. You may want to have more of a dynamic camera. So I'm going to put this to, let's say, 20. There we go. And now I have much more dynamic camera. There's a lot more length in this scene here. Slight modifications. And then I'm going to go through, hit the render button, and then render this out. Where'd it go? It went to my other screen. There we go. I'd also turn my settings up so that it looks obviously nice. I will notice on him, he has these other things that are glowing. That's why his stomach is glowing. This specific rig has that. So I have to make sure that I hide his controls. Otherwise, they'll all glow like you saw a second ago. There it is. I hope his feet are doing it too. Why didn't I hide those? Mr. Manhattan rig. Just drop everything on that layer. All right, now once it's done, we'll pretend that this is done. I'm going to go to Save Image. Save Image Options first. I want to make sure it's 8-bit, and I want to apply gamma and exposure. That way, when I do this, it will save it as it looks here. It won't save it as a lower resolution image or a different colored image. So this is going to be into my folder, so Sarcona underscore pose underscore 01. And so now, boom, it saves it into my folder. Okay? And then I go into a new file. Sure. Yes. Open up that same ready-to-go image. Go to Google, find my second image. Maybe not that one. Maybe that one. And then I pose my character for that. Again, working from the hips, getting the spine, getting the feet, getting the hands. If they're doing something in the air, make sure that you can see that they're in the air by still having a ground there. If they're on the ground and they're sitting on the ground, make sure nothing's going through the ground. You don't want to have the leg going through the floor or something. That would look weird. This is from the Making of Final Fantasy book. This was a movie that came out, if you remember, like years and years ago. Her hand is going through her sleeve right there. And that was like a professional book that was out. So you don't want stuff like that to happen. So make sure you spend some time getting it in there. You may not be able to get it perfectly lined up. Yes, sir?
Wait, was that in the final film?
Possibly. I don't know. I didn't see the movie. It was in the book. There's a Making of Final Fantasy book. And this is one of the stills that's in the book that, you know, they should have spent more time kind of looking through it, I guess. But it is bad. If your character is doing something, like I said, try to get into that pose because it'll only help you understand what they're doing. Especially when you get into some of these, like people will sometimes do these poses where, you know, they're sitting Indian style, right? So what does it look like when you're sitting Indian style? What are your feet actually doing? Your character does have limits. So if I go here and I start tucking this in, his leg is going to do that. And there may not be a control over here that allows me to fix that specific thing. And that's just a limitation of the rig. You just have to work around those limitations, okay? There he goes. And that's it. So you're just going to do that 3 times. Each one of your images will be 3000 by 2400 or 2400 by 3000. Feel free to jump into Photoshop after you're done with the image and touch it up, color, change it, whatever you need to. All of these I've adjusted the color on to give them the look that they have. Oops. Turn that off. So you can see that bottom one's not as saturated until I turn that on. Same thing here, same thing there. Okay, so that's the pose. Questions on the pose? No questions